Kia ora, I'm Erin J. Doyle. Welcome to my channel. This video is going to be a wrap up for NaNoWriMo. I guess, like that seems like the video to make. I guess it's a little bit awkward to try and do a wrap up because I'm part way through the thing. So my goal was an editing one. I'm not completely finished. Yeah, it makes doing a wrap up seem weird, but I thought I could at least give you like an update on how much progress I did make during NaNoWriMo. So if I recall correctly, because I'm not going back and checking, I had an initial goal of finishing the last this many chapters of the book, which were written but in a very choppy, incomplete way with lots of breaks where I couldn't connect ideas because those were emotionally taxing chapters for me to write, and so I had in previous run-throughs just kind of word vomited and then moved on and had found myself being quite resistant to editing them. So my goal was to edit them and if necessary actually write them. I did do that. Next I moved on to the other editing I had to do. A lot of these things were things which had to happen earlier in the story, but I didn't realise that until I was working on a later chapter. So instead of going back and reworking the beginning again, I just made a note that, you know what, somewhere before this chapter I need to have referenced this, or perhaps someone needs to have mentioned something, or maybe I have in this chapter definitely stated a character has curly hair, maybe I need to go back and make sure that it's curly elsewhere as well. Those kinds of things. So I had recorded this information in two places. One was my story tracking spreadsheet, which I'll show you in a minute. The other was just a good old-fashioned pen and paper list. The reason I had a basic pen and paper list as well as a spreadsheet is because the spreadsheet is everything broken down chapter by chapter, but then I also had a whole bunch of stuff where I didn't really know where it needed to go. It was stuff that I wanted to have happen or that I needed to check, but I didn't know what chapter. So that's what this list was. I had a total of 25 items that I needed to fact check or quietly slide in somewhere, and I have completed 8 of the 25. Not a glorious amount of progress, but progress, which is glorious. The second place that I had recorded things I needed to go back and do was in my story tracking spreadsheet, where I had the events of each chapter broken down. So let's check it out. I've mentioned the spreadsheet many times, I've talked about it in great detail. I'll leave a link if you haven't seen that video, but just to very briefly recap, here is a spreadsheet where I record all of the major events in my story as well as the edits that I know needed to be made. I have color coded it, so anything that is this pink color is something that is really big deal, fix needed to be done, oh my god. Anything that's this yellow color is more a thing that might need a check for consistency purposes, or maybe it's something which I could just expand on if at the end I had enough words to play with, like, you know, maybe I could make this conversation a bit longer, that kind of thing. Nothing super important. And then this yellow, the orange, the green, and down towards the bottom the blue are events which I've identified as being important to certain events or arcs, plots, etc. within the story. So this way I could visualize when certain plots were coming up within the story, and I could also visualize where I needed to put work in. So this is how the story was looking at the beginning of NaNoWriMo. Quite a lot to be done, let's be honest, quite a lot. Just scroll down so you can see the end as well, and then you can see like there's sort of a bit of an issue where certain things kind of vanish towards the end of the story in terms of plot. Now this is what it's looking like right now. I personally think this is a massive change. You can see there's a huge reduction in the amount of pink stuff, a big reduction in the amount of yellow things, so these are things I have fixed. And then we've got a whole lot more colour going on, either because I have managed to increase the frequency in which certain events come up, or events relating to certain plots come up I should say, and also because I've identified grey things as something that needed to come up. I think I've discussed this previously. Oh, it's such a blur. I'm pretty sure I've discussed it. I realised that if I was going to analyse the story, I would think that relationships were really important. So I've highlighted where relationships are important in my spreadsheet, and that meant that chapters which I previously felt kind of stuff was happening but nothing relevant to the plot, now I could see still had a lot of relationshipy stuff going on. So I think that kind of helped me understand where the chapters were important, even if they maybe didn't have, you know, big events per se. And then if we go down towards the bottom, you can kind of see there's a bit more stuff going on with some of the plots which weren't necessarily a big deal in the original version of the spreadsheet. So that's how the colour representation of things has changed. Not all of that is because I've actually made improvements so much as I have changed my understanding of the story to some degree. That may or may not be a really good thing. I don't know. Something I don't think I've previously discussed is the colour black, which has appeared a couple of times in the spreadsheet. I think last time I updated talking about the spreadsheet I had only introduced grey and purple. The black, that's a tricky one. It's probably like a whole video discussing the pros and cons of the black event. And I don't know how much of a spoiler it would be to make such a video. So I have to kind of think about that. But basically there is something which has happened in sort of the greater setting of the story. It is not something which involves my character in any way. It doesn't involve people she meets. She's separated from this event, but it is an event that she's aware of, so it is in itself a very big thing. So she's aware of this thing that's happening out in the world, and perhaps that affects her experience of being on the Camino. There are some issues with it kind of from a storytelling perspective. I have had a critique partner read a chapter which mentioned this event, and their feedback was, unless this event is like the 100% point of the story, it should be deleted entirely because it was too much of a distraction. Which I kind of understand. I do think that critique partner was someone who was reading, you know, a single chapter in isolation. They hadn't read anything that came before or after. So they were critiquing as though they were reading chapter 1 when they were actually reading, I think it was like chapter 4 or 5. So their comment was that I shouldn't mention it in the first chapter if it didn't matter or wasn't like the point of the story. So I don't know if that's still true and it's not actually the first chapter. And then the other thought I had was like, well, you know, maybe it is a distraction. Maybe though it is additional richness or depth to the world. The other thing I have to think about is that this particular event is something from my Camino experience. Not something that happened to me, but it was a major event that occurred while I was on the Camino. And it was something I was aware of, and it was something that I had many conversations about with other pilgrims, and it affected our experience of the walk, which is kind of why it's in there, keeping in mind that the story was originally a blog. So Originally, the story was much more true than it is now. I have definitely upped the fictional elements quite a bit. Even though it was always fiction, it was much more real. So it was there because it was part of my experience, but the character is not a self-insert. She's actually a very different person. The main character, I should say. I always refer to them as just like, oh, the character. I'm like, there are multiple. But yeah, like maybe my main character doesn't need this event in order to have the experience that she does, but I have written it in because it was in the original blog, because the original blog was based on my life much more. And yeah, I don't know, should it stay or should it go? So I put it into the spreadsheet so I could see how frequently it comes up, and it turns out hardly at all, which if I keep it, I don't think can stay like that. I have to either up the ante with it or get rid of it. And my other thought on this is, obviously when you're talking about a major event from real life that involves real people, and you have to have respect for real people, and I have debated back and forth quite a bit as to whether including an event that's based on this very real thing that happened to real people is or is not appropriate. That's why I'm like, oh god, there's a whole video on this topic, but until I have decided whether or not I can discuss it in a spoiler-free way, I can't make a video on it. So anyway, I have spreadsheeted it. I do think there's possibly more mentions of it than I've recorded in the spreadsheet because I've only just started recording it in the spreadsheet, but that's all, you know, future me's problem, and I'm currently working on it. I'm going to call it progress even though it's not done. So anyway, just for visuals, the summary is, this is where I started, this is where I ended up. I think it's an improvement. I'm going to say job not done, but lots of progress, and I'm going to feel good about it. I had at some point during November thought I might actually finish it this month, but that was really only because I was forgetting that my job gets really demanding in November, but only in like the second half. So early November I kind of coast along thinking, yeah, this is great, and then I hit mid-November, I'm like, wow! That happened last year as well. I don't know why I was surprised, but at any rate, I do think a lot of progress has been made. At this point, I don't think it's realistic for me to think that I will completely finish this year. I had hoped that I would, but I only have 17 days before I hit the road, and I probably won't get any work done once I do. So that's pretty much what I did this month. Lots of editing and colour coding and telling myself that it's progress. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave it a like. If you did Nano, let me know down in the comments. Tell me how amazing and awesome you were, because you were. And if you're new around here, maybe consider hitting subscribe and ringing that bell so you can stay up to date, and I'll see you next time. Bye!